My name is Clark. I am one of 3 people who can truthfully say this. They have time traveled. It's not what you think it's like. I'm not really certain how they selected us. I was working on my bachelor's degree at my state university when I was approached by the team. Project BTA OW33 is what they called it. No cool name like Project X or Project Alpha Time Warp or something along those lines. Just BTA OW33, whatever that means. They approached me and asked if I would like to take part in an experiment in exchange for my tuition being paid for. I only had a year left of school, but those 2 semesters were going to cost me $32,000. So of course I said yes. When I asked what the experiment was, they told me that it was extremely secretive. I would be finding out details the day of, and then I could decide to back out if I didn't want to participate. About 6 weeks went by and I was basically on call to be ready to go whenever they needed me. Finally, I got the call. I live in Atlanta and the team of the 3 of us meet up in a parking deck about 20 minutes outside of the city. Once we were there, we all got in one of those short school buses, and they took us out to the northern Georgia mountains. It was about a 2-hour drive and we didn't really get much time to get to know each other. We were under strict rules not to reveal information about ourselves or talk to each other on the bus ride over. The last couple of miles were on a rocky dirt road leading down a mountain. The bus parked in a small, maybe half-acre stretch of grass. The grass was freshly mowed, and I could tell by sight and smell. The alcove of grass was enclosed by large trees from the surrounding forest. All right. A man stood up from his seat at the front of the bus. We're here. I'll brief you all once we get inside the house. As we got off the bus one by one, we could see that in the center of the clearing was a building. It had one very large window on one side, basically encompassing that entire wall. Every other wall was black on the outside, and I could see through the window that the inside was painted white. There was a large silver metal ring that surrounded the house. It came about 3 inches off the freshly mowed grass. It was a foot wide, and it had lights coming from drilled holes all the way around it. Watch your step and please do not step on top of this ring, the same man said. Once we get inside, just go ahead and take a seat. We all stepped over the ring and made our way into the house. The house, as the man had called it, was made up of only one room. Inside, there were 4 chairs around a rather large circular table. The chairs, table, walls, and the one lamp are all white. The only thing that wasn't white in the room were the pair of bookshelves against each wall, both empty. After we all took our seats, the man introduced himself. Alrighty, welcome. My name is Dr. Olsen. I'm glad you've all decided to take part in this, to take part in history. As we told you all, this is extremely sensitive information. After my explanation of what this experiment consists of, I'll ask you if you want to continue. Understand? What if we don't want to continue? A woman said, about my age with fiery red hair. And then we know this super secret information, right? And you're just going to let us walk out of here? The man gave a smile. He knew that this would be asked. Yes, you are free to leave here knowing what the experiment consists of. However, the university and I are confident of 3 things. 1. You will want to leave. 2. The university's attorneys are rather powerful, and you already signed the NDAs. And 3. No one will believe you if you tell them. Silence filled the room. The redhead slouched back in her chair. A nonverbal, "Well, go on then." "The experiment," Dr. Olson continued, "is time travel." I smiled, but I wasn't sure why. The others seemed to snort a little bit in amusement. The tensions in the room seemed to release. Now, I know it sounds, crazy. I've heard it all before. I'm not asking you to believe in me. I'm asking you to just sit in this room, observe, and tell me what happened. We all nodded in agreement. A couple of okays filled the air. The doctor carried on. "All right, this is how it'll work. I'm going to drive up to the control center. It's about 5 minutes up the mountain. I have a couple of colleagues up there as well. From there, I will flip the switch in layman's terms." When Dr. Olson began his next sentence, he leaned forward and his face took on a very stern, angry father quality. "Do not leave this room. After I walk out, do not leave. Do not leave until I come back down the mountain. Walk back inside this room and tell you that you can leave. I have done this experiment before, but it's not on humans. I know that it works. I know that it's safe. I can promise you, this is safe. I cannot promise you your safety, though, if you leave the house." I remember the air shifting to an uneasy feel. "Are you sure that this is safe? What did you test it on? What's it gonna feel like?" A scrawny blonde guy said, who couldn't have been older than 21. The doctor continued, "I know that it's safe. No animal that I've used has been affected by this. I've used rats and I've progressed up to dogs. No bruises, no cuts, no change in behavior. And to be honest with all of you, I don't know what you should expect. I'm not sure if it feels like a tingle, a sting, a pinch, or anything else. This is the very first human trial, which is why you need to pay attention to any sensation that you feel." "Wait, okay. If we are actually about to time travel, where or when are we traveling to?" I asked. "You will be launching 3 hours into the future. Once activated at the control site, this building will disappear. My team and I will be on standby for 3 hours and then, poof, the house is back with all of you in it. 3 hours into the future." A long silence followed. I'm skeptic of just about anything, but something about Dr. Olson's tone, his body language, the way that he was explaining it, it was hard for me to doubt. He was dead serious. When it was clear that there are no more questions, Dr. Olson looked at his watch and stood up, and then he cleared his throat. "Alrighty then. It's 1:22 p.m. right now, so by the time I make it to the control site, it should be just before 1:30. The warm-up only takes about 2 minutes, so we'll mark your projected arrival time of 4:30. Are there any questions or concerns?" No one spoke. "Okay. I'll see you all in 3 hours. Or from your perspective, just a couple of minutes." The doctor winked, nodded, and closed the door behind him after adding, "Safe travels." The three of us stood from our chairs as we watched the doctor drive off. And then we all turned to one another, the tension yet again easing. "Well, he sure knows how to make an entrance and an exit," the redhead said. "No kidding," the blonde kid answered. Well, nice to meet you, fellow time travelers." We all chuckled a bit, and then nervous sort of laughter. "My name's Ryan." "I'm Clark," I replied back with a handshake to follow. "Emma," she said with a smile that could make any man or woman's head turn. We exchanged pleasantries and talked about our schooling and how we were selected. Emma was the first to ask what we were all thinking. So, what's the chance of this being legit? Don't get me wrong, I would love to be the world's first time traveler, but I feel like this is just going to end in a dud. Or maybe we're just getting pranked. Yeah, Ryan replied. When he was explaining everything, I thought that it may be a prank. Like this may be an actual experiment from the university, but it's an experiment to see if they can convince people that they time traveled. That's meta, I quipped. Oh guys, look. Emma started staring out of the large window. The ring that surrounded the building was slowly getting brighter. It looked like 100 laser pointers slowly brightening, shining up into the overcast sky. Does this mean that we're in the 2-minute warm-up? I said, already knowing the answer. I guess so. Emma started. God, my heart is racing. Mine too. Same. We all stood perfectly still, watching those skinny beams of light growing brighter, until it was nearly blinding. I turned to look at Emma. Her pupils were close into the size of a pencil tip, maybe smaller. Her gaze, along with Ryan's, was locked on the beams. I could see their faces getting more illuminated each second that passed. Second after second, it just kept getting brighter. Brighter and brighter and brighter until it was like we were being engulfed by the sun. And in less than a second, it was dark. I chose my words carefully. Less than a second. It was not like turning off a light. It was not like shutting your eyes. It was faster. It was instant. I saw Emma's pupils quickly grow large, as the absence of light from out the window met her retina. The inside of the house was still illuminated, thanks to one lamp in the main room. Outside the window was nothing. Not nighttime, not black, and not pitch black. Nothing. It almost had a color to it, but one I cannot explain. It gave off no light. It was the color that a blind man sees. It was the color of our sleeping nights in between dreams. It was the color of death. It was nothing. We all kind of looked around after a minute of silence, all staring out the same window into a void of absence. What the fuck is happening? Emma said in a shaky voice. I began. My heart stopped beating, Ryan said bluntly. I saw Emma raise 2 fingers to her neck. I didn't have to. I could feel it. It was one of the first things that I had noticed. When I was staring at Emma's pupils as the light had reached its crescendo, my heart was racing. And as soon as the light had disappeared, so did the rhythmic thumps in my heart. No, what is happening? Emma began to panic. Wait, this is just part of it, Ryan started. I'm really freaked out too, trust me. Obviously something is happening. If you believe the doctor, which I'm citing to, we may be, traveling through time. I actually agreed with Emma. Yeah, you're right. We just need to pay attention to this so we can explain later. Okay, heartbeat stopped. Check. That we're still alive. Check. And that void, the abyss thing. Check. We turned to the window in unison. I don't like looking at it, Emma said. It's unnatural. It's, not supposed to be. It's not black, but it has no light. I don't think. She wasn't wrong. I'm kind of glad I don't have a heartbeat right now, because I think I would have a heart attack. I joked. Anxious laughs filled the small space. We finally moved from our spots where we were staring out of the window. It was a relief to move around the room, and I'm not sure why. We were quiet for a couple of minutes. Emma was sitting in a chair with her knees tucked up to her chest, occasionally checking her non-existent pulse or looking at her hands. Ryan leaned against the back wall staring out of the window. I pulled up a chair next to Emma's and I joined her in quiet atmosphere. Our peaceful still was broken with Ryan's words. "Clark, Emma, there's something out there." We looked at him and then out of the window. "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "Out there. I can see things. Your mind is playing tricks on you. You know, like when you're in a pitch black room. Your mind will make you see lights and shapes and stuff," I said. "No," he countered. "It's there, look. Look out there, you can see it. I don't know how to describe it, just look." Emma and I both turned our attention once again to the emptiness. It was still, it was quiet, it was unmoving, abnormal. Yet it felt like it was meant to be there, like it was at home and we were its intruders. "I don't see anything," Emma said. "Me either." Ryan continued to stare out, unflinching. Emma and I stayed at the table, fiddling with her fingers and nervously finger-tapping. I'm not sure how much time had passed before the silence was broken. All I know is it felt like a long time. Maybe an hour, maybe two. "Well, this is taking quite some time, isn't it?" Emma said. "Seriously, I feel like we've been in here for a couple of hours," I responded. "No," Ryan said. "Not even a second has passed." Emma and I glanced, looks of confusion at each other. "What do you mean?" "Not even a second has passed," he repeated. His gaze was still locked in the void. "Time doesn't pass in here. When you look into it, you see. No time has passed. No time will pass. When you look into it, it all makes sense." Emma and I locked eyes once again, yet this time it was less confusion and more terror. I spoke up. "Come on, man, stop messing with us." He didn't reply. He didn't blink. Days passed, I think. Emma and I sat and we talked a lot. We did not grow hungry, tired, or thirsty. We did not have to use the bathroom. We came to a few realizations. One was that there is no temperature in the room. It was an absence of any heat or coolness. Air was non-existent. After roughly 12 hours or so, we estimated, our bodies began to not breathe automatically. We didn't need oxygen. The other realization was about that void. Ryan had been staring off into it for the entirety of her stay, save for the first couple of minutes. He had not moved. He had not blinked. Sometimes he would mumble something about time of the universe, but most of it was gibberish. And then I decided that maybe something is in there, and we can't see it, but Ryan can. And it's driving him insane. We decided it's best not to look at it for a long time. After weeks of being stuck in that room, Emma and I were going increasingly restless. We started arguing about little things, and eventually we stopped talking altogether. Sometimes I would hear her sob, trying to be quiet. I spent a lot of time crying as well. No tears could come out though. Emma and I ignoring each other was halted one day after Ryan simply stated, loud and clear, "I'm going out." It was the first time Emma and I had even looked at each other in a couple of days. It was the first Ryan had spoken coherent words in weeks. He did not look at us when he said it. And for some reason, neither of us protested. Maybe out of boredom, depression, or curiosity, we did not stop him. He walked over to the glass door and he stood for a moment, never taking his eyes out of the emptiness. He spoke to us, still facing the nothingness. "I'm going to learn its secrets, its power. I will become a god, and it welcomes me." He opened the door. He reached his hands out into the void. It looked like an optical illusion. Exactly where the doorframe was, and as soon as he broke through that plate, his hand disappeared. All I could see was his wrist with nothing attached. He brought his arm back inside of the room. His hand was missing. There is exposed bone, flesh, and tissue, but he did not bleed. He didn't scream. He smiled. He then walked out into the void, looking like a ghost walking through a wall. Emma and I stared in horror. She ran over to me and we cried together for a while. She said 7 words to me through thick sobs that chilled me to the bone. The first real sensation I've had since coming here. Are we going to be here forever? Emma and I spent a lot of time crying. What else was there to do? Imagine, Anta. You were stuck in a room with nothing to do but to stack chairs or topple over empty bookcases in frustration. We tried to have sex. It was just another thing to do to pass the time. But with no blood pumping through our veins, it made things difficult. We played all of the name games, invisible tic-tac-toe, tongue twisters, etc. We can't exactly play I Spy because our options for colors are either white or Boyd-esque. Sometimes you would try and sleep to no avail. We just lie there, occasionally together and sometimes apart. Eyes closed with no rhythmic rise and fall of her chest, no soft sound of a heartbeat, just utter silence. I didn't think that I would ever make it out. I'm not sure of the total time that I spent in there. It was hard to tell and grew more difficult as time went on. At first, it was easy. You could tell a couple seconds had passed and then minutes grew to hours. But especially after Ryan left, it was difficult. There was no rising sun. There was no moonlit sky with the glittering of stars. There was no feeling tired, no sleepiness or droopy feeling that settled in after a long day. It felt as if my internal clock as we working itself to be, well, broken. Emma and I were starting to really lose it, but not in the same way that Ryan did. To curb our sad days, we played pretend like we were kids. I'm not sure if this was an actual decision on our part, or if our minds are making us to do it in return for our flake of sanity. Sometimes one of us would be a waiter and the other would be eating at a fancy restaurant. Sometimes we would play doctor and one person would have to undress and be examined. In some scenarios, she would be my wife. I would come home from a long day of work and she'd have dinner prepared for me. She would call the kids down and we would pretend to eat. And I would tell her all about my day while sneaking table straps to our dog. Our favorite scenario was strangers. At least that's what I call it now, looking back. We didn't have a name for it then. I would be sitting at the table pretending I was at a bar at a club. She would walk up and grab a seat, and I would give her a couple of glances and side eyes before telling the bartender that I would buy her a drink. She would try to contain her glowing smile and she would bat her eyelashes at me. And then she would make her way across the table, across the bar and take a chair next to mine. I would ask her name and then we would slowly go from surface level conversation into the world of getting to know each other deeper. Childhood memories, fears, aspirations, secrets and dreams. And then eventually, one of us would break character and we would laugh. We would also write plays in our head for each other and perform them. We would make scripts for TV shows and movies and then act them out. Mostly improv. Those were the good moments. The secure ones. Those escapes for us were equal to the escapes of regular people in the real world, who were watching TV or scrolling through an app so they don't have to face the reality that engulfed them. But at some point, reality always sets in. Our entire world was in that room. I started to forget what my mother's face looked like. I started to forget what my face looked like. One day, or night or whatever, I looked off into the void. And then I treated it like somebody would treat a naked homeless man screaming at them. It's best not to look for too long, but It's okay to catch a glance in your peripherals. I stared off into it, wondering about its color, its absence. I wondered where we were physically. Were we somehow in another dimension? Were we being observed right now? As I stared off, I saw something. I know I did. It was impossible to miss, like a brushstroke on a blank canvas. Yes, it was there. It was something that existed in that vast expanse of nothing. A tree. It was a tree. A perfectly symmetrical pine tree. Almost like those abstract ink blot tests used for psychiatric evaluations. It was just like that, sitting dead center in my vision. It wasn't like spotting the tree from inside of a window in the real world. No, I wasn't there with the tree. I was merely observing it. I felt like an alien from another planet witnessing it. The tree didn't know that I was there, and I didn't know where it was. Suddenly, a strong and swift open palm made contact with my cheek, and I heard Emma yell, "Snap the hell out of it, Clark, please." My face stunned, but the pain was dulled as I noticed that she was crying. "Whoa, hey, what's wrong?" Oh God, you're really back. You're really back, thank God," she said through quivering lips. "You were just staring out there for days. I couldn't do anything to snap you out of it." "Days?" "Yes, God, I would cover your eyes or shake you, but nothing was working, so." She kept talking, but your voice sounded like she was falling down a well, as my own thoughts took over my attention. "Days?" I looked outside for 10 seconds, at 20 tops. There is no way days had gone by. I told her this. "What?" she said. "Are you messing around? You stood there, right there, still as a statue for so long. I was screaming, I was shaking you, I was pleading with you. I swear I'm telling the truth." I grabbed her hands, consoling me. All I remember is seeing something out there, and then I don't know what happened. "What did you see?" Her crying had subsided a little, and her sadness was replaced with curiosity. "I think it was a tree." "A tree?" "Yeah, well, kind of. It had like a motion to it, like it was growing. Not from the ground like a normal tree, but it was spreading, I guess. Like when you take the netting off of a Christmas tree and all the branches fall and the tree looks fuller. It was just like that, but constantly expanding like an optical illusion." She looked at me as if I had just told her I had cancer. An expression of sympathy tangled with worry. She let out a heavy breath. "I was so worried that you were going to leave like he did." I hugged her and I scratched the top of her head in an attempt to comfort her. And then she grabbed my neck and kissed me lightly. It wasn't the first time that we had kissed. We had plenty of times before. I don't know how it started. I can't even remember our first one. It was so long ago. But every so often we would just look at each other and kiss. Was it a relationship or just boredom? I knew everything about her, it seemed, but I don't know. I was stuck there with her. What else were we going to do? Would we have gotten along on the outside, in the real world? If this experiment worked, would we be together? I don't know. A lot of time passed since Emma slapped me to snap out of it. We were more quiet than usual, more thoughtful because of the events that had occurred. She brought it up first, interrupting our previous conversation. "So hey, let's say that we make it out of here. But whether that be in a million years or a billion, or whatever." "Uh-huh." "Well, you know how you were looking out the window, and days passed in a couple of seconds. What if that's the best thing to do, to pass those years? Maybe if we just look out, it'll feel like a couple of hours and then, boom, we're back to reality. I had wondered about that too. What if we never snap out of it though? What if we walk out like Ryan did? Or what if we're just stuck in here forever, hypnotized? I know, she said. I thought about that, sure, but what? But, I don't know. What's our other option? Realistically, we can't keep living like this. We can't keep spending every day going through the waves of talking in silence and laughter and crying. I'm losing my mind, and I know you are too. I tightened my lips together and my silence answered her. So she continued. What's worse, spending a trillion years in this room until you pull your hair out and slowly slip down the insanity slide, or looking at that freaking abyss of nothing. And yeah, there's a chance we'll go off the rocker like Ryan and hypnotically walk out of the door, but is it worth it? I think so. We had spent too much time in there. I don't know how long, but it felt like multiple lifetimes. If this ended in death, I welcomed it. I knew we had to do it. It was our only option. Okay, we'll barricade the door, I proposed. We'll put the table, the bookshelves, and everything else in front of it. It's at least one line of defense against us leaving. Yeah, it's no guarantee, but I like the idea. And we did just that. The idea that we could be out of there in a couple of hours was the only motivation that we needed. After the furniture was moved, we sat on the floor in the middle of the room. Our legs were crossed and we faced each other. I'm terrified, she said openly. I know. I am too. What if we never see each other again? What if we never see anybody again? What if this is it? Like it. I grabbed her hands and I pulled her a little closer before replying. No matter what happens, I'm grateful that I had you here with me. I couldn't have been here alone. This place is hell, but it would have been so much worse without you. She gave me a nod and she smiled. I returned the same gesture. We both adjusted our bodies, still in a sitting position to face the window. I looked to my right and I admired Emma's gaze out of the window, just as I did when we were transported here. I squeezed her hand. Ready to spend an eternity together, she said with a shaky breath, almost laughing. You know it. And with that, we peered off into the nothingness. It's hard to describe what I saw. The first thing I saw in that vacuum of the void was, once again, the tree. It moved and breathed and acted like it had before. After a while, I couldn't see the walls of the room anymore, as if I was enveloped into the darkness, like I was a lone astronaut without any planets or stars for guidance. I couldn't feel my butt against the floor anymore, nor Emma's hands gripping mine. In fact, I couldn't really feel anything. It was like I was slowly losing all of my senses. That horrifying nothing color slowly dissipated, and the tree did as well. The best way I can describe what came next is by comparing it to something you have all seen. If you close your eyes and you still see some light, you see shapes and objects and other things your brain tells you to see. If you stare at a wall, a blank wall, there's almost a movement to it. A static-like sensation on the wall that you never really notice until you focus. That's what came next. As the nothing disappeared, I could see these shapes in the darkness. Random patterns, stars, and static filled my vision. It felt like I was falling. The randomness of the shapes took form into my most nostalgic memories. Things I didn't even know I remembered from the trenches of my mind. I felt this itch almost. I swear in those moments I didn't have a body. I didn't have eyes, yet I could see. I felt like someone moved my still active brain into a jar to keep me alive, and that's what I was experiencing. Just my brain, doing its thing with no outputs or inputs. I felt it prickling, but I wasn't sure where I felt it. I existed, but not in a physical sense. I thought I was dead. I hope that is not what being dead is like. And then, faster than a light switch, with no sound effect and no transition of any kind. Pop. I was back, standing in that room. Sunshine made its way through the overcast sky and immediately flooded the window. I was not facing the window though. I was facing Emma with Ryan right behind her. Both of them were looking out of the window, just as we were before everything went dark. My focus was on Emma's pupil, just as it was before. It did not change in size. Before I could begin to process what was happening, Ryan screamed louder than I thought physically possible. I jumped and I started to back away, but Emma didn't even flinch. Ryan grabbed the lamp from the table, smashed it on the ground and picked up a large piece of glass, and pushed it through his chest and into his heart. His hands were bleeding and his chest was discharging blood by the pint. He died within a minute. He was smiling the whole time. Emma, still unmoved, kept staring out of the window. I just kept trying to process my thoughts, which were abundant. Ryan stabbing himself was the least of my concern, to be honest with you. I backed up against the wall opposite of Ryan and I slumped until I hit the floor. I sat in a fetal position and I was praying the doctor would come down the mountain. The experiment had worked, kind of. The room did disappear and we reappeared exactly 3 hours into the future. Dr. Olson said that he had installed the window in case we could see lights or flashes. He did not know about the void. After Ryan's death, the university shut down the project pretty quickly, but I doubt that was the last the world will see of it. Dr. Olson can only hear the events that took place from my perspective. Emma is still in a catatonic state. She hasn't spoken a word or made a noise since returning. She's completely unresponsive. There's no sign of her getting better. I visited her once at the home she lives in now, and I'm never going back. She stares off at the walls the same way Ryan stared into the void. If there's a God out there, I just pray she isn't still in there somehow, in that place. I hope her mind is free or at peace. Why am I not catatonic? Why did I make it out okay? Did I see the same thing Ryan saw? I'm not sure. I try not to think about it. I have lived subjectively, longer than anybody will ever have to experience or to suffer. I don't have the guts to kill myself, though I think about it often. I don't really care if I get in trouble with the law by sharing my story. It's therapeutic to share. And like Dr. Olson said from the beginning, no one will believe me anyway. Day-to-day life doesn't bother me. I don't mind interacting with people. I like eating food again, and I like taking a nice hot shower. I like knowing that I can die, and that I will die. It's not the waking moments that disturb me though. It's when I sleep. My dreams were awful and they're almost always of that place, that room. The doctor says it's because the room is where my brain thinks it has spent most of its life. He says the dreams will lessen as my stimuli from the real world increases. But dreaming isn't the worst part about sleeping. It's every other moment between my dreams. As I slip away into oblivion, so does my body and so do my senses. My mind is still active, but I'm encompassed by that void, drowning in its emptiness. That color, that nothing. Every night it haunts me. I hope to God you never see it, never realize that it's there. Because when you do, it won't go away.